Welcome to Glad You Asked. Thank you for joining us today. So glad you took time to put in a question or two and to meet with me. So today's question, it comes from parents. How do I help my kid deal with peer pressure? And as you know, growing up, it can be difficult to deal with peer pressure. And if you're a student, listen to this. Hopefully this little segment will be important to you and helpful as well. And so one of the things we all know is that our friends are important, and how we choose our friends is important. So if I were to say to you, hey, what qualities would you look for in a good friend? And then look at your friends and say, hey, what qualities do they have? And so parents, you want to help your kids define the qualities that make a good friend, and so they can recognize them and lean into them. And so our friends, often have more power over us than even our convictions, and maybe even our parents, and maybe even sometimes the church, and sometimes maybe even more than God. And so it's important that we get the right friends, which is a reason for this question. And so a couple of things verses I want to go to that I think is important for you to share with your kids. And if you're a kid listening, this will be some important verses for you. In 1 Corinthians 15:33, the Apostle Paul writes, and he says, "Don't be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." So there's something at stake when you hang out with people who are not good influences on your life. As a matter of fact, if you go to Psalm 1, you see this very same thing, because it talks about the man who is blessed is the one who meditates on the law day and night, but also then he talks about the person who is standing, sitting, and walking with those who are bad influence over his life. So it's important that we recognize what a good friend is. And so we want to stay away from bad company because it can have an impact on our life. But also, we want to think about the consequences that we want to teach our kids when it comes to being with good friends. And there's a proverb that helps us with wisdom in this area. And so I want to read it to you. It's Proverbs 13:20. It says, "He who walks with the wise grows wise, but the companion of fools suffers harm." And there's a couple of things that I think that need to be pointed out here. One is, if you walk with the wise, you'll grow wise. And so if you want to grow in wisdom and make better decisions and have better application in your life, then you want to be around wise people. Who are wise people? Wise people are the people who know God and they follow what He says. And so that's what we want to encourage our kids to do, is to be around wise people. In their formation and maturation, we want to encourage them to head in the right direction in their relationships. And so then we look at the second half of that verse, and it says, in contrast to walking with the wise, don't hang out with fools. Now, if you'll notice in the verse, it doesn't say that a person becomes a fool because they hang out with fools. What it says is they will suffer some pain, that they'll suffer some consequences, negative consequences in their life if they hang out with fools. And so it's important that we help our kids understand it's not necessarily that, if you are hanging out with people who put peer pressure on you to do the wrong thing, that it's going to make you a terrible person, but it can bring incredible harm to yourself. So you want to make sure that you're hanging out with the right people. Often, if we look back on our life as adults, we can find a lot of the decisions we made, our poor decisions, where we have a lot of regrets, really stem back to the people that were around us. So we want to choose to be with wise people and not with fools. I think back to my own life when I was in high school. I made a decision to do what this guy said one time, and I didn't realize that he was actually walking me into a trap. And when I look back on that, I got detention at school, and it wasn't because I was trying to do something wrong. I was just not hanging out with a person who was making wise decisions, so therefore I suffered harm. I got detention. So when we think about our friends, one of the things, there's three things I think I would encourage you to do with your kids. One is go over these verses, obviously, but these three things I think will be helpful, is you help them think through how they choose their friends. So number one, I would say, help them to choose to lead their relationships. In other words, get them to think about their relationships and the direction they're going. You can either be a follower or you can be a leader. And so if you're going to help your kids, help them to choose to be a leader. That means that they are going to choose the terms, the times, and the turf. And what I mean by that is the places they go, the things they do, and the times that they do it. And so they want to make good decisions. And so you will tend to do that if you lead the relationship. Obviously, like take time. Well, when you're with people can make a real difference in the choices you make. And so if you're hanging out with people who are up to no good, that may be at times where, like my mom would say, nothing good happens after midnight or things like that. And so help them to be aware of the time, help them to be aware of the turf and the places they go, and help them to discover the terms. There's some things that they need to say no to, and so they can guide their own friends and when they choose to lead the relationship. So if they are choosing to lead the relationship, they will not be given in to peer pressure. Here's the second thing they can do. Choose to lay back. Sometimes you can't control the time, the turf, and the terms, so what do? You help your kid to understand it's okay to take a step back away from your friends. And so if they're going to be going to do something that you shouldn't be a part of, take a step back. It doesn't mean that you have to lose them as friends, but what you want to do is you got to have an understanding and help them have an understanding of the direction they're going. So if they're not leading the pack, then what do they need to do? Maybe they need to step back, lay back a bit. And here's the third thing real quickly. Sometimes you have to choose to lose. That means there may be some friends in their social group that maybe they just need to keep a distance from. One of the things that we all have to do in making good decisions is make some really hard decisions. We always want to be open to share the gospel with people, and if you're choosing to lead, you can do that. But if you find that every time you're with this person, you end up doing things that you shouldn't do, you end up being involved with things you shouldn't be involved in, what do you want to do? You want to help them to say, sometimes you got to choose to lose some friends so that you stay right with God, so you stay right with your parents, so you make better decisions and you have fewer regrets. So I want to encourage you to help them to think through, is there anybody that they need to lose as a friend? Now, this is an extreme measure, and it's not something that we should go too quickly. But if we don't choose to lead, and we have chosen to lay back, but it's not helping us with our situation, what do we want to help our kids do? Sometimes it's okay to lose people in our life and relationships we have to create boundaries in our life so that we make healthy, wise decisions and that we avoid suffering harm, like Solomon wrote in the wisdom of that passage that says, a fool hanging out with fools will bring harm to our life. So I want to encourage you today, parents, to help your kids to choose to lead their relationships, and at times to choose to lay back if it's going the wrong direction. And sometimes if it's going the wrong direction, they may have to make an extreme choice and choose to lose maybe a friendship that they've had in the past because it's going the wrong direction. And so hopefully this, parents, will help you. And if you're a student, hopefully you can think through these things and apply these to your life. Thank you for joining us today for Glad You Asked. And if you have a question that you would like for me to entertain and spend some time on, would love to do that. You can email that at info@gracepointchurch.org. Don't forget the E after the T in Grace Point Church. And then we will be able to get that, and I'll get to that question as soon as I can. May the Lord bless you. Have a great week.